There are many jokes about retirement, including the cartoon that's in your program flyer today, but this may not be a laughing matter to many people facing retirement. I don't want to personalize this. It is of a concern to individuals, corporations, and governments. I'm pleased to introduce these experts in the field of aging and the sociology and economics of retirement. The complete bios are in your program, so I won't give all of that, but let me give you a brief introduction. We're going to have a guy by the name of Jason Siegelman of OSU's faculty who is called to the White House. I guess he's advising somebody else instead of us today. But we're pleased to have with us, thank you for subbing at the last minute, Bonnie Cantor-Berman. Bonnie, come on up. She was appointed the director of the Ohio Department of Aging by Governor Kasich in January of 2011. She previously held positions with Pioneer Network, the Office of Geriatrics and Gerontology at The Ohio State University. Welcome, Bonnie Cantor-Berman. Our next panelist is Executive Director of the National Institute on Retirement Security. She has worked as a congressional senior policy advisor on Capitol Hill, had a leadership position in financial services provider with financial services provider TIAA-CREF. Please welcome Diane Oakley. And to moderate our panel today, and I told myself I couldn't call her an old friend, a friend for a long time, Linda Mauger, Director of the Office of Geriatrics and Gerontology at OSU. On behalf of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, WOSU Public Media, the School Employees Retirement System of Ohio, please welcome our panelist and our moderator. Linda, here's your panel.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here. I love the CMC. I think you do amazing work for our community. Thank you, Jane and Andy and all the members. It's an honor, and it's an honor to be here with our panelists and to have Diane come in from out of town and be with us, and to have Bonnie say, yes, I'll do that when called at the last minute. You know, it's really, really good to have longtime friends. So that's what we are as well. I'm going to start real quickly. My role today, I think, is just to kind of set the stage about what I think the many shades of gray and retirement might mean to people and maybe should mean to people. But I'll share initially a little story that Bonnie remembers too well, because I told her it happened 10 years ago, and she said, no, it was at least 15. So, and that was a while ago at the Office of Geriatrics. We often went out and talked to different people about aging topics, and this particular day I was talking with a group of middle school children, and I had given them an assignment to draw a picture of an older person. And they, in the end, drew all these pictures of people just all bent over and hair real curly sticking out and all kinds of canes and things. And before they started the assignment, one little boy had his hand up and he was just really wanting my attention. Finally, I said, yes, you know, what's your question? And he said, could you stand still so I can draw a picture of you? And I want you to know that we think that was 15 years ago. So they loved it in the office. I told it a few times because I'm a big person and I can take it. But retirement really is much more than the frizzy perms and the canes that were drawn that day. It really is a complex mix of our aspirations, our needs, the realities, and things that we must think about far beyond the commercials that we see on TV all the time, where they simply talk about the gazillion dollars that we need to gather in order to afford retirement. Certainly dollars are an important part of the mix, but it really is much more than that. Your cartoon in the program actually is a cartoon that's been hanging in my office for a very long time. And so one of my goals for today is to have you go home and not be one of the 7 dwarfs, but to make a plan and to think about all the sides of retirement and what that might mean for you. To begin our conversation today, let me just share a couple of demographic statistics, which you probably already are very familiar with. But The truth is about 79 million people were born between the years 1946 and 1964. So the baby boomers are here, and we're just going to keep coming and coming and coming. About 10,000 retirements every day for the next 17 years, if you can imagine that. The first baby boomers turned 65 in 2011. And if you reach the age of 65 and you are a woman, you can expect to live another 20 years. If you are a man, and I'm sorry about this, it's about 17 and a half or so. But those can really be productive, important growth years that we need to think about in a different way than previous generations ever had the opportunity to think about them. So we will be reasonably healthy, and I know all of the people in this room have already been taking charge of their lives. We're not going to even ask today if anyone smokes, because we already know the answer is no. We're not going to ask if you exercise, because I'm sure you do. But those are some of the keys to staying healthy and being in charge. This thing, aging, has been a tough sell over the years. Bonnie and I experienced that for years together as we worked at OSU together for about 15 years. And it's finally starting to catch on. I think we're finally starting to realize that the population is aging. One of the proofs of that is one of the recent editions of the Gerontologist, which is the journal from the Gerontological Society of America, says the byline is "Not your mother's old age, baby boomers at 65." Bonnie will also hear often the quote from Dr. Bill Thomas, which I've always liked. He's a physician who's been trying to change the face of long-term care for many, many years. And he talks about how when we were born, the baby boomers, there was chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry ice cream. And now there's Chunky Monkey, Cherry Garcia, Jenny, who knows how many flavors she has. So, we will change the way, we have already changed the way the world runs. We will change the way retirement works. And thanks to the Dispatch this week, we had wonderful articles. So if anyone's here from the Dispatch, thanks for the focus on that. And I had talked to our local writer during that process, and I understood that it was really an effort by many of the newspapers across the country, so giving some voice to aging in that way. So let's think about some of my many shades of gray I want to bring forward and then turn it over very quickly to the panel. But we need to think about where we live. Only about 4 to 5% of the population, 65 and over, ever lives in a nursing home. Only about 15% of the people, 85 and over, live in nursing homes. We generally live in our communities. And how are you going to do that? Where will you live? Will your house fit you? Do you know about universal design? Do you know to take care of those before you're bleeding, as I often say? Contractors are starting to catch on to those things. Does your community fit you long term? That's big picture. Think about that. There is this wonderful effort starting here in Central Ohio, being led by MORPSI, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, which I am so fortunate to be part of, and lots of partners from the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, the Franklin County Office on Aging, all jumping in to say, how could we help this community grow in ways that fit us for the rest of our lives? That means sidewalks, bike trails, complete streets that accommodate pedestrians, cars, buses, bikes, etc. Mixed-use development that accommodates us living where we want to work and play and get our services, etc. And so you should be encouraged to know that we are thinking about those things in the region, and we should be hearing your voices to make us think about them and do things even quicker. That initiative is called Livable Communities or Lifelong Communities, Age-Friendly Cities. It's going on across the country. And so and just because we sometimes call them that, the truth is they're good for the entire population. So, a family with 2 children can live very successfully and better in a livable community than not. So it really is an advantage for everyone. How do you want to spend your time? Probably not following Snow White and the vacuum, I hope. But, you know, how much longer would you like to work in your job? How much longer do you need to work in your job? If you're going to have an extra 15 years or more, would you like to start that business that you had always thought about but didn't have time, didn't have the finances, didn't have the network, whatever? Is this the time to do that? I am absolutely convinced there's an artist inside of here. And so someday that's going to happen, hopefully. I don't think any of you will pay for it, but it may happen. Are you a caregiver now? Will you be a caregiver? Those kinds of roles in our lives, whether you are needing the care or giving the care, are not something that can be taken lightly or that happen overnight. So we really do need to give some thought to that. Knowing that there's about 15 million Americans who are providing care right now for someone with Alzheimer's disease is an important fact. And there's about 5 million people suffering from Alzheimer's disease. So we just take that one little disease situation and see that those numbers are astounding. We need to plan for those things. What do you know about community-based services? Do you think your loved ones might qualify for social services? Plan. It's important to think about that. What about your own health? What about your doctor? Is your doctor a geriatrician? Probably not. We keep trying to train them, and there will never, never be enough geriatricians. But your doctor can really understand the importance of the involvement of the caregiver, the importance of linking you to services that help shore you up with that chronic disease you may just have. Most of us do at some point. So it's really important to look at where you're getting your health care, how you're getting it, and communicating about what you want from that. What about lifelong learning? We need to continue to grow. It's an opportunity for us to grow as we have these extra healthy years. And what about giving back to your community? I have been lucky enough to be in an elected position for almost 10 years and currently serve as chair of the Central Ohio Transit Authority Board. And so that public side of me really does understand how we don't have enough money to make it all work, and we need the people to be involved. So whether it is a governmental agency, social services, your church, etc., this is the time in retirement to bring your knowledge and your support and maybe your finances to help in those capacities. It's not only good for you. Research shows that we, as we age, actually do better at the aging process if we have that social involvement with people and organizations and continue to grow. Where will your children be and where will your friends be? Important to think about. We need those social connectivities on all levels. So that's kind of my broad brush strokes of what I think is important when we think about retirement. We do need to think about the money, but it's a real stirring of the pot combination of all of those things if we're going to have a really good plan. So with that, I'm going to turn over to the panelists. Either one can start as they would like and really ask that question to them as we begin our conversation, which will then just flow about how they would define their many shades of gray as they think about retirement.
Well, thank you all for having me. I know that I was not the speaker of choice. Won't stop me. And that's actually a good segue into the whole concept of retirement. Because you know what? It might not be exactly what you have planned. And I'll let you know that's a good thing. Because we cannot, with the knowledge we have now, fully anticipate the world of opportunity that is going to be ahead of us. And so I just wanted to share with you a couple of points. The most important thing I think I can share with you about retirement is that each of you and in each of your families and communities need to move away from what we call the declinist view of aging, which says to you, I'm sure, you know, oh my gosh, and to quote my grandkids, you're getting old, yuck. No, no, no. You know, just erase that from your minds. The declinist view of aging would say that the diseases that we think about the chronic ailments, the lack of functional ability that folks are concerned about, the declinist view would say that is an inevitable part of the aging process. And if you leave here thinking that, then I will have failed, and I'm not a person that takes failure lightly. That is an outmoded view of aging. Instead, and I think you will find that in the Kasich administration, there's a general agreement on this, that we need to move to seeing our older adults not first and foremost as service recipients, but first and foremost as our elders. And I see everybody sitting a little straighter. Yes, we are elders. Other communities, other religious groups, more folks in the Eastern religions, they get it. What do I mean by being an elder? An elder is someone who is a respected member of society, who continues to grow, continues to thrive, and continues to contribute. We have to help change the way society views us as we age. And you know where it starts? With each and every one of us saying, I'm an elder. Now, as an aside, I can tell you that many of our programs in the Department of Aging start at age 60. So when I talk to the governor about these and then I talk about elders, he keeps saying, why 60? Like, it's just, I'm not happy. So I have to explain why the federal standards and all of those kinds of things. But on a more serious note, we need to be thinking about retirement or our aging as a time of growth, a time of learning, and a time where we will be thriving. Now, that may or may not be a retirement time, because retirement is not a phrase that makes much sense anymore as a blanket term. We will all be able to think about it in very different ways. We will never retire from having wisdom. So the question you have to think about is retire from what? And move towards what? So that's the first message that I want to give, that we need to be thinking about elderhood in a very, very different way. Once you do that, and once our communities and our businesses do, who the heck wouldn't want to employ somebody with wisdom? Who the heck wouldn't want to employ somebody who has the ethic that I get there at a certain time and I work really hard? I am describing our elders. I'm describing our baby boom generation. We are great employees. We need to help folks understand that which we bring and the way in which we can help the younger workforce get it. Now, some of you may be saying, yeah, but there's a lot of things that have passed me by or passed an elder by. Our training programs in the state are changing to ensure that if somebody wants a little tweaking, needs to know this, needs to know that, there are opportunities to go back to our universities, our two-year colleges, and our training programs and get that knowledge. I would far rather hire someone with wisdom who gets it, that I can train in the intricacies in the task, than somebody who only knows the task. So that's my first message.
Can I interrupt? Because they gave me this
Oh.
clock. So.
Well, they should have given it to me.
See this
Okay.
clock?
That's my first and last message.
No. Okay, that's fine. Okay, then Diane. Then we'll go back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
My expertise when it comes to retirement is the economic side. But, you know, the economic side has a personal side. And it can be the retiree, and I heard one retiree woman speak about how every Monday night she leaves her home, drives 30 miles, picks up her granddaughter and grandson. She takes her granddaughter to dance lessons and pays for dance lessons for her granddaughter. And they go and they have dinner with her grandson. And her granddaughter said to her, you know, Nana, this is our tradition, which is exactly what you're talking about, sharing that wisdom, being the elder. And she said, you know, if I didn't have my pension, and if my pension gets cut, and I have to think about what choices do I have to make, because that's where the economics comes in. It's the choices that you have to make because of the resources you have. How do I tell my granddaughter, I'm not coming on Monday night? That's really what it's all about. And yet, there's so much when you look at that story that ties into the economics of pensions. Here in Ohio, NERS has done some studies. We did a national study we just released that said when you start to look around, and those of you who've been like at Denny's or been to Bob Evans, and you know maybe you're there a little bit after the first part of the morning rush, and there's those tables of retirees. Again, that social network that's so important. Sitting around the table having breakfast. Or they're maybe arriving at the restaurant a little bit earlier than the rest of us for a value in a dinner, because they do seek out value. But here in Ohio, that's the #1 place where retirees spend their money. And when they spend that money, it gets generated into the economy. And in fact, here in Ohio, we know that nearly $14 billion of economic output comes from the benefit payments that go to the retirees from the public employee system alone. Nationally, when we look at public, private, state, local, federal government payments to retirees in this country, in 2009, that generated $1 trillion of economic activity. It supported 6.5 million jobs in our economy in a year when it was really important to have those jobs. In a year when if you were 60 and you lost your job, you probably were going to be looking for another job for a year or more, and maybe taking a job at 1/3 of what you were earning beforehand because of what was happening to our elders. So when we look at pensions, I think we have to think about the full dimensions of them. And I think Americans are, we know from research, we've done at NERS and research done elsewhere, there's a great deal of anxiety about the economics of pensions. There's anxiety about what am I going to do and what mission do I have? And you know, the reality of it is I've heard often people talk about, well, you know, most people spend more time planning their 2-week vacation than they do planning their retirement. So very clearly, we have to think about those shades of gray. And yet, maybe I'll just ask for hands. How many of you have ever seen in a 401k marketing material a couple on a beach? Am I right? Well, we actually went out and we asked Americans, what do you think a secure retirement is? Really and we did it in an open-ended way. The responses were just amazing to us. Only 11% of the population said hobbies, relaxation, travel. The real answers were being able to keep my standard of living, being able to pay my bills, being able to, you know, do some things. One gentleman made a wonderful, he said, you know, I'd like to be able to pay my bills and take my grandson to a ball game, take him to go down to Cincinnati, see the Reds. So that's really what people want. You know, and in reality, we're not going to be on a beach. We're going to be sitting around a dinner table, you know, sitting there trying to figure out, can I pay my health care bill? Can I pay my pharmacy bill? What are we going to do for food for the rest of the month? And those are going to be tough choices. And the idea of having savings is important. And the one thing that we're not doing today, even when you look at households, and these are both households with DB plans and without a plan, and the savings that we're doing, for those households that are within 10 years of retirement, only 6 out of 10 of those households have more than 1 time their salary saved. 11% of those households nationally, and this is data from the Federal Reserve done in 2007, so it's before the market crash, only 11% had 4 times their salary saved or more for retirement. Now, the good news here in Ohio is Ohio has one of the highest concentrations of households that have over 60 and above, and again, that's the data set coming from the federal government, where there is an individual, either themselves or their spouse, getting income from a defined benefit plan. And that has a big economic impact, so that when an organization that I've come to know called Wider Opportunities for Women has released something called an economic, they actually call it the Elder Economic Income Security Index, Ohio goes to the top of the states, towards the top of the states. 90% of the households in Ohio can afford to live in retirement in dignity without needing support. And one has to ask, as we change some of our ways of saving for retirement, are we going to be able to continue to have that type of steady stream being going to individuals so they know they'll have an income for as long as they live?
Wonderful. I think that's encouraging news about Ohio, and I'm very glad to hear it. Let us, and we have about 8 or 9 minutes before we begin taking questions from our audience. Can we together share what we think are maybe our greatest challenges of our longer lives and extended retirements and our greatest opportunities? Bonnie, do you want to start?
Well, since time is short, I'm going to pick a challenge that is also an opportunity. So I'll save an extra minute for you. Who here, and I am asking for hands, wants to be sicker or more frail? No hands. Now, I can tell you we all want to be healthier. It turns out, and I am here kind of representing state government, the most cost-effective way for our state government is for us to be healthy too. So that we are going from what is largely a lose-lose situation, which is people with chronic illnesses and not taking care of themselves and very costly care, to saying, hey, if we can keep people healthier, we can actually save money and invest it in different ways. And so to me, the single biggest challenge is the chronic disease burden that we are all in this room fearful of. The good news is, far more than genes, that which we do to and for ourselves will determine our chronic disease burden. So this is where the lecture starts with the shame on us for some of our behaviors. And if they were easy to change, I know we would. But we must. We must for 2 reasons. One, it's what we, or 3 reasons. One, it's what we all want. We want to be healthier. Secondly, it eliminates some of the burden that you are concerned about being a burden to a family member. And third, we all in this room want to create a legacy where we are able to leave a better world with funds and money for our children and grandchildren. So why would we use limited federal and state funds inappropriately? Instead, we can be healthy because it's what we want, and money can be expended elsewhere. So to me, the biggest challenge is our biggest opportunity because it is in our reach. To turn it from lose, 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 sick, cost a lot of money, am a burden, to win, win, win. Wow, I can do that which I want because I am physically, spiritually, and psychologically healthy. I am not spending resources inappropriately, and I'm able to leave a legacy of additional resources to my children and grandchildren. So yes, I have an opinion.
I'm going to talk 2 things, I guess, on challenges and opportunities. I think sometimes a second career can be a wonderful opportunity. You talked about the inner artist. I have that. I can't wait till I can just wander around with my camera and snap pictures. But I also had an opportunity, like, I actually went to work in the federal government, working for a member of Congress, when I was 50. Most people were half my age. I was the elder by a large number. But, again, there are places where your wisdom is so valued. And at the same time, you can also do some interesting things for your economic situation. If you're someone who's never been covered by a defined benefit plan, the fact of the public sector being a place to be, for people to think of as a good place to go and work, should be coming more on the top of our list. And where we're seeing, large numbers of retirees from the public sector leave, we ought to be also thinking about how can some of the real talent that's out there in the workplace that maybe is no longer there available to have a job in the private sector transfer over to the public sector. So I think I would like us to see a little bit more of how we can make sure that older Americans have a wider range of job choices and that people start to think differently about that. I think it's so critical and so important. I also think it's, again, some of it is the choices that we make, and they're choices we make every day. I never thought that I would think about saving when I was 20 years old, and luckily somebody came and approached me. And so I think also that opportunity to talk to, which we probably don't do enough in our own households, talk to our kids and our grandkids and show them the importance of saving. I think the other opportunity we also have to look at is, so often today you go into different places, and again, it's wonderful to see older workers working. But we also have to make sure, part of having retirement plans is to make sure we have this security. We found this during the Depression in the economy. We want to learn from what we had in the past. That by giving people a secure retirement, we also could create job opportunities for our children and our grandchildren. And, when it's a retiree who collects your ticket when you go to the movies on a Saturday night, because they're dependable and they show up, we miss that opportunity to teach that 18-year-old child or son or our daughter that, you have to show up for a job when you have it and teach them that responsibility. So I think there's really a lot of intergenerational opportunities for us to think about bringing into the workplace and reminding us that retirement plans are a workplace tool to provide for some of those transitions.
And I have to just tell you that I was, I'm almost 60. And I was never in government before. I had never done anything like I'm doing now. And I just figured, what the heck, I can do it. And I'm doing it. And that's not the usual trajectory, but yeah, I am living my brand.
And you can have more fun when you know what you're doing.
Yeah. And when people actually think you know what you're doing, that's good too. Well, and I think to add to that, the volunteerism that we talked about, I think throughout our lives sometimes we say we'll volunteer to kind of give back a bit, and maybe we should do that. The truth is, it gives so much purpose to our lives, and is such an important piece of sort of who you are and how important you are to the world around you, and you're so needed by the entity that you're serving. So we came here to talk about retirement, and I think what we talked about mostly was work. And so hopefully that resonated with everyone in a good way. It is 1 o'clock. Where's Andy? I want him to know I'm right on target here. Yeah. Good. And so now we will take questions from the audience for about 15 minutes, and please pose them to whomever you would like to ask the question of. We have some questions?
I'll ask a question.
Good.
This is the mic, guys. My name's Ed Elberfeld. I'm with German Village Connections, which is German Village's elder care support initiative, kind of based on the village model.
Yep.
And my question would be, as we begin to track our members' experiences with German Village Connections, I wondered what kinds of data or evidence, this is mostly for Bonnie, I guess, what kind of data or evidence would you like to see to support, our claimed efficacy?
Thank you so much for that question. The actual program that you're referencing really is the Village movement. And German Village will be our first village here in Central Ohio. And it really is the folks coming together to assist each other and to really truly be a community. The most well-defined village in Ohio is in Athens, just so if folks want to look up the Athens village. What's interesting is that we have to write a plan every year for the federal government to be getting our funds from the Older Americans Act. And one of the things that we wrote in it was that we are going to be promoting concepts like the village movement around the state. And I know you just had a meeting last week in Chillicothe about that.
Thank you.
And we want the villages to learn from each other. A couple of the things that we are looking for, because ultimately there is a limit to what state and federal government can do, and what we're saying is, what can the communities do together? And so we have to see, is there efficacy? We really are going to be very interested in seeing a utilization of social service and health services dollars. So in some of the villages around the country, what folks are looking at is, they keep people off Medicaid? Are we able to take folks that don't yet need public assistance, and are we able to serve them in other ways? So that is certainly something that we are going to be looking at. But regardless of that, we want healthy folks. So things that are hot buttons are things like, nobody wants rehospitalizations. When we go towards accountable care organizations, if we do, depending on what the Supreme Court says, we're going to be trying to make sure that when somebody leaves a hospital, there are folks in the community to care for them and care about them so that they don't have an unnecessary or avoidable hospitalization. So that would be a marker that we're using for many things. I am especially interested, and I think this will resonate with all of you, in seeing what happens to those individuals who are living with dementia at any stage. Can they remain in their homes longer? In part, that saves money, but more importantly, it's what they want. And we want to provide that which people want. We also know that a lot of the health care that folks with dementia get, meaning going to hospitals, for example, is unnecessary because we weren't able to figure out what was really going on with them because we didn't understand what they were trying to tell us. So when you in a village or in a community like you're talking about really know somebody, you're able to eliminate some of those unnecessary events. So my advice to you is to figure out what your community's hot spots are. What are the things that are costing the most for members? What are the things that mean the most to members? And focus on those. It is less of interest to us that you think about general metrics as opposed to serving your own community's needs, because that's what's going to be the essence of the village movement. Individual communities figuring out what they need and us being able to see that once they've identified it, they can meet it. My goal is, and I will be very blunt about it, my goal is to see success with the village movements and to figure out what role the state can have in promoting and supporting the village movement in all communities.
And, and for the rest of you, if you want to learn more about this, you can simply Google.
Just giggle, see where it gets you.
It's not really that funny.
Maybe that's a new thing we need to develop, is a giggle.
Google.
You can Twitter, you can giggle.
Village concepts and aging, and you'll find some good information. Do we have somebody else?
Yes, my name is John McKnight, and I work in the collision repair industry. Just a brief comment towards the aging is that good news for people entering seniorhood is that they're better drivers. You know, the myth is that would be the opposite, but so good news for seniors, maybe bad news for body shops. I don't know. But my question for Diane or whomever concerning long-term care insurance. for myself, not terribly wealthy, so making a purchase as expensive as long-term care insurance is a big consideration, a big investment, something I'm very tempted not to do simply because of the cost of it. Is there any conventional wisdom, from an objective perspective, such as yourselves, as to whether or not a person should stretch their budget to afford long-term care insurance?
It's long-term care insurance is certainly, I think, still evolving. And I'm not an expert on it, but I do think there's programs, there's some ideas about, there's programs where you can coordinate it with the federal government and Medicare and what happens in terms of spend down. And you may want to explore some of that. A lot of it is also going to be looking at your own sources of income and wealth and what you want to protect. So, I'm in the situation with my mom where she's in a nursing home and we're in the process of spending down her assets until she has nothing. And, it's a sad process to see. But a lot of Americans also realize that it is expensive. If there's some way to get it in a group situation, I think that's helpful. And then think about what your own resources might be able to cover and balance it out. I know sometimes they want to sell you this policy that's going to give you inflation and all this other protection. Take it measuredly and work your way up and buy some protection. You don't necessarily need to, you don't need the Cadillac of plans, in my view, but it is something everybody needs to think about, and we too little do that. There's very, very little long-term care, and what that does is it does put great burdens back on the social safety net in terms of Medicaid in particular, and that's part of the driving thing on the budget.
All right.
Bonnie and Linda, it's great to see long-term friends again.
It is.
I'm Jack Sandman. I am retired, true confessions. I am retired and I'm 72, so it was about time. A topic that is woven into all of what you said but isn't specifically addressed is the issue of socialization. Most of us, whether we realize it or not, get most of our social interaction through our work. And when that ends, that source of interaction with others disappears largely. Is there any way to focus on how to keep people engaged as human beings with other human beings? I've seen individuals retire, basically disappear behind their doors, and figuratively, you never see them again. So I pose the question. Thank you.
I think that Jack, and it's wonderful to see you, you raise an extraordinarily important point. One of the things we know is that physical health and mental health and spiritual health, they are all interconnected. And so you are absolutely right. You're not just losing out. You are actually going through health decline when you stop with the socialization, absolutely. One of the things we have to be thinking about once we know this is to prepare. And to think about, when you think about what's going on in German Village, that is part of the concept of a village movement, is to keep that socialization going and to make sure that there are people that are talking to other people, et cetera. It is a shame that we have become a society where most of our socialization comes from our jobs. So it is not retirement that is the issue, it is the way we are living our lives that is the issue. So we have to, I think, clarify that and realize that things that have been important in the past, family, church and synagogue, volunteering, and these kinds of things, they still remain important, and we must, as a society, find and refine that balance. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is you no longer, and our children will teach us this and grandchildren, socialize necessarily by being in the same room with somebody. And so the thing to keep in mind is technology. And unless we as a state in so many different ways think about how to use technology in an innovative way, we will suffer exactly the fate that you are talking about. For example, there are senior centers at home. There is no reason why you cannot, through your computer screen, be able to participate. So we do need to understand that the barriers between self and other are different now, and that screen becomes a very important conduit.
Well, and I would just add real quickly, I think that what we've talked about a lot here is personal responsibility as well. And so throughout our lives, we redefine ourselves. I mean, we go to school, then we redefine ourselves as a worker, and then typically as, being married and a parent, et cetera. And we somehow often don't think about redefining who we are as we age. And so giving some real conscious thought to that is very important. Yes, we have another question.
Yes, my question is for Diane. It sounds like you are very high on defined benefit plans, and that you were citing several things you found very positive about them. And I like what I heard, but I'm concerned that there are places like Rhode Island, Detroit, there are cities in California that can't meet their funding requirements. And it's now they have the issue, how do you pay for it? So one of my questions is, what went wrong with the obvious failures, and what can we do about it?
And I just need to, as the moderator, say that my little clock says it's 1:13, and we're supposed to be done around 1:15, so I just wanted to give that heads up. Because we need to come back here about 12 more times and to talk about these things.
Exactly. I would say quickly, number one, NERS actually, my organization did a publication called Lessons Learned, and we looked at 6 well-funded pension plans that were still well-funded pension plans after the market crash. And in fact, again, most plans are well-funded. We looked at states that were predominantly Republican, predominantly Democrat. We looked at small states like Delaware. We looked at huge states like Texas and New York. We looked at Illinois, and actually, despite what most people think of Illinois and their pensions, there is a pension plan, a public pension plan in Illinois that's well-funded. The lessons that we said were learned were lessons that actually you apply here in a lot of ways in Illinois, in Ohio, in the sense that one of the key things is making sure that the contributions to the pension plan are made. Rhode Island and other states, Illinois is one of them, have never really fully funded their pensions. And so when the market goes down and the assets they have aren't there, that becomes an issue. In terms of their government budgets, they just cut back the contributions. We can't make them this year. Or they went and borrowed that money again. And from the sometimes from the pension fund, sometimes from Wall Street, and issued a pension obligation bond. So the importance of having those ongoing flows, the employee contributions like you have here, 10%, that's above the average for states that don't have Social Security. The median's about 8% if you don't have Social Security. Making those pension plans, when you make changes, fully understanding the implication, and that is whether they're restructuring the plans to make sure they're sustainable, making sure that there's a reasonable sharing of the burden, as well as when you make a benefit improvement, understanding what those improvements are going to be and making sure there's money there to pay for it, making sure the COLA and the assumptions are all good assumptions. All of that is there, and all of that stuff is going on here in Ohio, and I think that's great, and I think it puts you in a place where you can make these plans sustainable. From a DC point of view, I think a lot of the data in terms of what retirees have and how the impact is, the DC plans are still a small percentage of that. And so what we also see in the private sector is a lot of employees who don't have any pension plan. About half of the private sector workforce has not even a 401k plan or a traditional pension. And we have to find ways to encourage the small businesses and else to encourage pensions and maybe see if there's ways that we can bring some of the efficiencies that we've learned work in the public sector to the private sector.
This will be brief. George O'Donnell, CMC trustee. When I was in grade school 60 years ago, maybe 3 to 5% of the children were heavy. Today you go into a grade school and you see an astronomical number of people who are overweight. I don't think the three of you touched on that subject of food choices and what government should be doing about food that is prepared for children in school and revamping the schedule dramatically?
Well, I can answer that very quickly, and something that we haven't really announced yet or talked about here, but we have, as many of you know, the Golden Buckeye program in Ohio. Needs to be revamped, needs to be reinvigorated, as we all know. We will be doing so, and you'll be hearing about that this spring, to really focus on keeping people healthy. We will be creating, as part of that, something that I, at least for now, am calling a Golden Buckeye in Training, to really have a curriculum that really teaches kids that which you in schools, the decisions you make now, look at the impact it will have. The only way you can get children and others to really think about the obesity epidemic, the one you brought up, is for them really to think about, I do want to be an elder someday. And when you change the view of elderhood, we believe you will change the view of children who want to grow to be healthy. So that's going to be our plan going forward.
Very good. Well, why don't you help me thank WOSU Public Media and the School Employees Retirement System of Ohio for today's program. Also, Bonnie, we were very lucky to get you here today. Thank you for all your contribution. Diane, thanks for coming into town. And Linda, good job, as always. Don't forget, next week, we've got Frank Cass and the Leadership Legacy Series, brought to you by Bricker and Eckler and CMC. And be sure to sign up early for that. It's going to get crowded. Please have a blessed Passover and a happy Easter, and have some cookies and coffee out in the lobby. Thank you.